Hello and welcome along to the Westminster Roundup with the Sport and Recreation Alliance. I'm your host, Alex Sexton. I'm very pleased once again to be joined by the Alliance's Public Affairs Lead, Ryan McCulloch. How are you, Ryan?
I'm very good, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad, thank you. Very busy, of course, and that will explain why we've not been able to grab the opportunity to provide an update for the last month or so. We've been deep in parliamentary debates and media work to try and highlight what's happening. And I guess that's the best place to start is COVID, tiers, lockdowns, restrictions. What is the latest in that, Ryan? And what does that mean for our members?
Yeah, so obviously, as you said, Alex, it's been sort of 6 weeks since we last did this. So I think we were just entering the second nationwide lockdown then, and we were talking about the implications for that and sport being shut down, sport and physical activity. We've obviously subsequently gone back in early December to a tiering system, slightly more strict tiering system than we had prior to that lockdown. And obviously, members have been living with that for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I won't go into all the details, but obviously, slightly stricter system. Sport and physical activity have come out of it reasonably well, I think we would say. In certain areas in tier 3, gym classes are not permitted, snooker halls can't open, and generally across the tiers it's more strict about who you can and can't do things with. But I think we're reasonably pleased that sport and physical activity and the importance of it has been recognised in the tiering system. There is a bit of work going on around the gym classes stuff and activity in tier 3. And that's particularly important because I think we're seeing a rise in cases as we speak now, middle of December. And it looks like that there are certain areas when the review that the government has takes place on the 17th of December, that more areas will be put into stricter lockdown measures, whether that's the very few tier 1 areas into tier 2 or a lot of tier 2 areas into tier 3. And in particular, there's talk of London, Kent and Essex are the ones that we've heard, but there'll be other places around the country. So it's just making sure that we look out for that and that members, know that they, in those areas and where they operate in those areas, can get in touch with us if they've got any concerns about the tier 3 restrictions. But the likelihood is that that is going to be the case. One other thing I think I should probably mention is the kind of 4 or 5 day moratorium on COVID restrictions over Christmas, because I think that really only applies to the home and visiting in the home. So in terms of activity or, I think it's very much like going to any other public place. I think the rules still apply in terms of household mixing in sport and leisure facilities. But if members have got any questions on that, then they can let us know. I think the tiering system, despite the great news of a vaccine, is going to be in place for the next probably 3 months into spring at least. So I think we just need to, as a sector, just remain vigilant. We know that it's fairly safe and that everybody's doing the right thing, but if we can just stick with it for another 3 months, hopefully we'll be getting back towards some normal activity in March.
And as you mentioned, it's a lot of that intricacy and technicality behind what it means for certain activity in certain areas. And absolutely, as Ryan mentions, please do get in touch with us if you have any specific questions around that. But I guess there's also an opportunity here to almost congratulate the hard work done by the sector and stakeholders supporting the sector for making sure that these restrictions weren't as severe as last time out and allowing activity to continue in some form across every tier during this new system. And it's some fabulous hard work that's been put in by our members to make sure that their activity is safe and secure to continue to deliver at this time. So although there's still hurdles to overcome, a huge congratulations on the collective effort, I believe, of everybody. And Ryan, you've been in these discussions in Parliament as well. The noise made, the evidence given has had a big impact, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what you just said there and kind of echo that it does make a huge difference. So to all the members who have, submitted return to play guidance through us to DCMS or straight to DCMS, I think what they've done for their sport and their activity in doing that, you can't overstate really how important that will be for members and users and anybody that plays that sport. So and it's been a tough time for everybody. It's been, how do you absorb the rules? What effect do they have? What's the long-term impact going to be? So it's just been a tough year for everybody, and it's been great to see the sector really pulling together in places, but also really making a difference in government. And as you've seen from the tiering system, clearly our banging on the door about the benefits of sport as a collective sector have worked because it's been recognised.
Perfect. And speaking of making that difference in government, we were very privileged to be involved in the House of Lords evidence session and discussion. Lisa Wainwright represented the Alliance and was alongside Hugh Edwards from UK Active and Andy Reid as part of the Sport for Development Coalition and Sports Think Tank, alongside loads of other hats that Andy wears. And the discussion revolved around grassroots sport and recreation, the current state of play. What came out of that meeting, Ryan?
Yeah, so this is a kind of brand new committee, essentially. This was only the second evidence session, and it started at the start of December. So it's actually titled the National Plan for Sport and Recreation Committee, which doesn't sound too catchy. But essentially, I think, not to be, people shouldn't be frightened by that title, but the overall goal is to find out whether there should be a national plan for sport and recreation. So it was pretty wide-ranging evidence session last week. With Lisa, Hugh and Andy. It talked about, the impacts of COVID-19, certainly, and what that means for the future of sport. But it also talked about, there was a lot of discussion about the delivery structures around, how Sport England and government is funded, about lottery funding, the importance of that, given that 2/3 of Sport England's funding comes from the lottery, and how we protect, protect the central budget of Sport England. It's a wide-ranging committee, so essentially there was, some talk about whether Sport England is, fit for purpose, those sorts of questions. But there was also a lot of stuff around safeguarding, around the government's sporting future strategy and how effective that's been, and whether that is an effective delivery mechanism. Something interesting about the crossover between departments and how sport cross-cuts, as we all know, sport and physical activity cross-cuts a lot of areas of life, and therefore a lot of government departments, from the communities and local government departments and the Department for Health. So there was a lot of discussion about whether that should be more centralised. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's just over an hour, but it's a really detailed, interesting conversation with some interesting questions. So I would check that out. And they are subsequently, I think they'll probably want to get a lot of people in for evidence. So any members who are interested, that can get in touch, and we'll see, we can work with the committee to see who and when they might ask people to appear. But if you want to make a difference to that committee, they've launched their call for written evidence at the end of last week, and I think that's going to run until the end of March. But I'm happy to put details at the bottom of this when we send it out for members who want to get involved that way.
Perfect. We'll make sure that is included in the message that goes out with this video as well, Ryan. You touched upon it there about the interesting discussion I had around different government departments and how sport and recreation can impact those areas. And it seems almost silly to mention, but as it is an evidence session, but how important is it for our members to be able to provide that written evidence, or if invited, to give that statistical information that shows the impact they create across different areas of society, so that we could perhaps unlock funding or work with other government departments?
I think it's very important. And the telling thing from the committee last week was that there was a lot of what we know to be true in, if you like, the theory of the way that sport is delivered. So we know theoretically it's difficult when 3 or 4 government departments are in charge of something like the School Sport Action Plan, for example. But the committee were very keen for the sector to say, yes, but how is this affecting you at ground level? How is that playing out in the statistics and participation in accessibility of facilities? And like kind of all areas of parliamentary work, if the committee is going to produce a report that it wants government to listen to, it needs to be heavily factually based on outcomes. And only our sector and our members can provide that. So it's vitally important that as many people as possible respond to the calls for evidence, either if they're asked to be witnesses or if they, want to write in. There's no controls on who can write. Anybody can write in for the written evidence part. So I'd suggest that people do and members do. And if you need help with it or any kind of tips and hints, then get in touch with me or my colleagues in the policy team. We'll be able to help out, kind of helping you sort of frame that.
And you can get in touch with the policy team by emailing policy@sportandrecreation.org.uk. And as Ryan touched upon there, that will certainly help you if you are looking to submit any evidence in whatever form that may be. Now, that wasn't the only activity we had in Parliament recently. There was a set of DCMS questions. What happened and what was the outcome of that, Ryan?
Yeah, so you've just said that there was some more activity. I wanted to talk about this to bemoan the lack thereof of activity at DCMS questions last week. I counted 37 questions across the 40-minute session. DCMS, as we all know, covers not just sport, but there were 2 main questions and a couple of supplementary. So I think 4 or 5 total sports questions across 37 questions. And the sports minister, who is, has been very active with our members, didn't need to attend the meeting because so few questions were tabled. So I'd like to see more in the way of sport, and it was really just to express the frustration that they aren't there. So we know that there were more questions that need to be asked, and it's about timing, and sometimes it falls that way and sometimes it doesn't. But we certainly will be working harder. But if members have got concerns that they want to be pushed at times when there are DCMS questions, we'd be happy to do that in the hope that we can get more of it talked about at DCMS questions and get our fair share of the question slots, I think.
And it's, again, it seems like an obvious thing, but I guess it's the weight of numbers. If we keep knocking on the door, if we keep asking the questions, then we're more likely to have a fairer share of those DCMS questions, aren't we?
Yeah. And there is not always do MPs get in, and they may have had a sport question which doesn't get in. And I know that was actually the case last week. But if the more sport questions we can try and get asked, then the more likely we are to have more MPs who put in for the ballot, and therefore more who get on the final ballot for asking questions. So it was just really to point out that I thought it was a little bit weak on the sport front this week, but we are definitely going to try and influence that next time.
As Ryan says, that is something we're certainly looking to influence, and something else we're looking to support our members on. It seems to be one massive mountain after another in 2020, but what we do know is that there's a very important deadline of December 31st coming up, and it relates to Brexit. Lots of discussions in the media over the last couple of weeks. What is the latest, and what is the impact for our members, Ryan?
Yeah, so Happy New Year to everyone, I'm afraid, but the deadline for the end of the Brexit talks is the 31st of December. They are ongoing, and there have been some kind of subsequent deadlines. So with Monday morning of the 14th of December today, there wasn't supposed to be a deadline for a deal to be done yesterday. That was then extended into this week. But the ultimate deadline for the end of the transition period, as we've said a few times on here, is the 31st of December. We then revert to what was known as WTO rules, or no deal rules, tariffs on trade, etc. There have been, the government and the EU have worked out some temporary measures to kind of quell disruption in that time. So there are going to be things like a possible block on travelling in Europe for British citizens. So if we have, members who have got seasonal workers, etc., obviously COVID adds that level of not being able to travel, but there is the possibility that people will not be allowed to travel. You need 6 months on your passport if we exit on WTO rules. So if you don't have that, then you will not be able to travel into Europe. And there has been some air and freight contingency put in place. So if members are moving goods about or importing goods for any reason, then there has been some contingency put in place for that. However, we need to emphasize now that it's kind of crunch time, and that members need to be prepared for some disruption. Even if there is a deal, it's worth highlighting that the deal may have elements in it that mean that things are not as easy as they were before. So there may be additional administrative burdens, which could incur extra costs, etc. We're hoping to get more of a full breakdown of what they are. But we're obviously getting to within kind of 2 weeks now, nearly, of the deadline. So I think we'll be frantically trying hard to find out what has and hasn't been agreed before it's published, if we can, so that we can give members at least some sort of a run in. But we have obviously seen this kind of brinkmanship before, and it looks like it's going to go to the last minute. So it's just about making sure that members are prepared for any possible disruption. We will try and prepare members as best as possible for that. But if it is a case that members are finding out from the 1st of January and they've got any problems, then get in touch with us and we'll try and work out what the new system is after that, if we haven't already got that information.
Very much so. And last minute is certainly the way this is looking. To help with that preparedness, please do head over to the Sport and Recreation Alliance website and check out our Brexit pages. There's some support and guidance for you there. This will obviously be updated as soon as more information reaches us, and we can provide that additional support for you. A lot of untangling to do in early 2021 with Brexit, COVID, and anything else that happens to be thrown at us in the meantime. But we'll be there to support you every step of the way and to make sure that we can get through this in the best possible shape. A couple of short pieces of housekeeping before we sign off for the year. And just to flag to our members that the Sport and Recreation Alliance offices, virtual offices, will be closed from Christmas Eve until Monday, the 4th of January. If you have any concerns or questions over that time period, please do still get in touch, policy@sportandrecreation.org.uk, or tweet us at SportRecTweets. But I guess just a final chance to say a huge thank you to anybody that has watched us over the last year, has taken some guidance from us, has worked with us, and has helped push forward the case for what the work we do in Parliament. I know that our members have been a great source of support for you as well, Ryan, in the conversations you've been having over the last year.
Yeah, and again, I just want to echo what you said, Alex, that I've been constantly astounded at the capacity of our members, to continue to just keep coming back in waves, because it's been an awful year where it's looked like it's got better and it's got worse, and then it's got a bit better and it's got worse. And it is always, that's been the thing that stood out for me, is the constant ability of our members to keep coming back and driving forward the kind of those changes. And it wouldn't be fair of me to name names, but there have been a lot of our members who and their representatives who have worked very closely with us and been extremely helpful to us. So it's kind of invaluable when we're talking to government to know what's going on in our membership. So we would always encourage people to get in touch. But I think Merry Christmas to all the members, who deserve, probably, if they can get it, a good couple of weeks off.
Completely, and I echo that sentiment back as well, Ryan. Incredible resilience and hard work and passion shown by our members in the last year. And as Ryan said, I think we're all deserving of a short break. So please do have a wonderful Christmas spent with your loved ones. And we look forward to supporting you and pushing on towards a happier and healthier 2021. Myself and Ryan will see you again in the new year. Take care for now.